To say that Kansas State's offense this year has been a disappointment would be a massive understatement. After a year of consistently solid, if at times unremarkable play calling led by Connor Riley, the current Cowboys offensive line coach, this year's offense was expected to take a step forward with Matt Wells. Even by myself, when I made a video years ago about Matt Wells' quarterback coaching track record. What's actually happening is, well, this. Yeah, not ideal. Some people would go as far as to call it horrible, and they wouldn't be wrong in saying that, but the worst part is that most people don't really know who to blame, or at least most people can't articulate what happened to this offense. Some people blame Matt Wells, some people blame Brian LePack and the offensive line, and some even blame Avery Johnson. And while I have my own concerns, such as the real answer is, well, unfortunately just about everything. So walk with me here into this journey of offensive ineptitude, and let's see if we can't diagnose the problems plaguing the offense this year and if there are any solutions to be had. I'm Ace Edwards, and welcome to the Alleycat Film Room. K-State has had some special issues running the ball this year, which is odd considering how effective they were at it in previous seasons. They were one of the top rushing offenses in the country last year, even with some anemic performances during the last part of the season. Some of the drop-off can be attributed to a new offensive coordinator, some of it to losing an NFL draft pick in DJ Giddens, but to me, the most notable drop-off has been the offensive line play itself. There's no other way around it other than to say the offensive line outside of John Pastore and at times Sam Hecht have been an abject disaster this year for one reason or another, and that's in both the running and the passing games. And let's start with a couple of glaring examples in the running game. This is a pretty basic zone read play. And although that this play goes for a gain because Avery Johnson ends up pulling the ball, it's the blocking on the inside that concerns me the most. If you're unaware, a zone read is a play call where the quarterback is reading the end man on the line of scrimmage and will run the ball himself if the defender bites down or tries to play the running back, or will hand the ball off if the defender is playing on the outside of them. Why I want you to look at this play, even if it's technically considered successful, is to observe how the offensive line is blocking. For the sake of the inside zone concept, which is the one the running back is running, Avery pulling the ball doesn't matter to the blocking assignments of the interior guys. So just for the sake of this exercise, I want you to imagine Dylan Edwards is the one that took this handoff. Look at how the blocks develop. How it should go is that each lineman will block the guy in front of them while moving laterally, or if they have no one on them at all, move up to the linebackers and try to seal them off from the play. An important part of this play is how each lineman needs to trade off their guy while running it. If a guy is in front of you, or in between you and another guy, you need to at least bump the guy that's on you off his path, or wait a second until the guy next to you can get in front of him. Otherwise, you're putting him at a massive disadvantage because the angles of the block are bad. Enter the main character of this play, Taylor Poitier. TP has a guy in front of him. At the snap of the ball, both guys on his side are pressing inside. What should happen is TP should at least bump one of these guys until Sam Hecht can get into position to seal off the other. What actually happens is TP starts to go upfield, realizes he messed up while Sam Hecht is literally in the backfield, and then throws a token arm in the way to try and save face. If the backside defender stayed home on this play, which, spoilers, he does later, this play is dead in the water because the zone pass-off has been completely ruined. It happened again later, although this one's slightly more excusable because the movement is before the snap. TP immediately jumps inside, leaving John Pastore in an impossible situation, and Garrett Oakley is too late seeing that someone has broken through on his split block and the play is blown up from the backside. And again, I'm not trying to bully TP here. Just about everyone has had rep like this. Take this play from the Army game. The worst part is that there are times they've handled pass-ups correctly. Take this nifty little RPO zone read design from the Arizona game. Same general rules as listed before, except now there's a flat route added to the tight end moving across the formation. On this play, they actually handle the pass-offs pretty well. Sam Hecht waits a second and absorbs the block while moving laterally and gets help from TP to seal that guy off. You could say that Gus Hawkins whiffs on the edge here, but honestly, that tackle block is easier to make up for when everyone else is doing their jobs. They did the same thing later, though a bit more with the outside zone blocking setup. And this very well could be an overcorrection from earlier in the season where Iowa State's guards had trouble accepting that a pass-off was necessary, such as when J.B. Nelson decides to extra special super block someone that Hecht had basically taken out of the play instead of the linebacker that pinched down. And it is these overcorrections, specifically in the inside zone game, and the lack of consistency with how they do them, that makes calling a running game for this particular type of offense so much more difficult than it really should be. And that is a main reason why the offensive line appears so bad. They're relying on the inside zone game, which relies a lot on pass-offs and communication, and they're just not executing that communication in the same way that they had before. And that is what makes the running game so difficult to deal with, but you also have the passing game. Pass blocking is a lot simpler to explain than the running game. Straight up, the team has to be better against the blitz, and the point of pass protection isn't necessarily to be perfect all the time, though that is great, but rather to not fail all at once and to leave some kind of escape route. To put it bluntly, there have been far too many times that there have been multiple points of failure that have killed a play. Take this play against Iowa State, where Matt Wells has driven up a neat little fade concept for Jace Brown that gets wide open, even though it did wrongly get called for an offensive pass interference after the fact. Unfortunately, Sam Hecht and Andrew Langang both get beat at the exact same time, and Avery can't escape the pocket and has to throw up a random prayer ball that lands absolutely nowhere close to anyone. I fully recognize that this is an all-out blitz, and that Iowa State is sending one more blitzer than K-State has blockers since they're in an empty set. However, the reason why I know that this is a pass-blocking mistake and not a schematic choice is looking at John Pastore. He's the key to showing how this should have been blocked up. Sam Hecht just gets beat. It happens. But Andrew Langang needs to fan out to get this last guy far earlier than he does. This is because, in this type of protection, the furthest threat from the quarterback is the one that gets unblocked, because that's the one who gives him the most time to throw. If Langang sticks to this man, it's possible for Avery to roll out and make this throw. Is it likely? Probably not, but at least gives him a fighting chance. And I guarantee you, this is the play that Arizona was watching whenever they did all of this. This is the part of the conversation that I personally have been dreading the most, and I think most of the fan base would probably agree. But the uncomfortable reality is that Avery has not lived up to expectations this season. While he's been a generally accurate passer, he's regressed in his decision-making in a way that has turned some theoretically good offensive play calls into bad ones that end up killing drives. Let's start with the easiest one and the one that everyone has pointed out. Yeah, he's not running when there's an opportunity to do so and scramble to get free yards. We'll talk about it in the passing game, but just know that there are times he's not pulling the ball in the option game to run it as well. And the poster child for this general philosophy of not deciding to run is this play. There's no real excuse for this. Even though he's trying to flick the ball outside, there's no one in front of him to stop him if he decides to run. But even outside of him deciding not to run the ball when it makes sense, there are times that his decision-making when he decides to throw the ball has just been off. The most consistent example has been how he reads out stick, a play that people have crucified Matt Wells for calling on third and mediums because there's a route that is thrown short of the sticks. Stick is actually a call that has a short hitch that can turn into an out and then a flat route behind that. Avery has actually correctly read this out and thrown it to the flat before, such as in this play. It's a quick hitting concept that's meant to get the ball out to get quick and dirty yards in the passing game while not putting the ball in harm's way. The thing is that it isn't necessarily the problem that there's a route short of the sticks, because that's necessary to make the play call work, but rather that the flat is thrown far too quickly. Take a look at these examples, for instance. The hitch becomes available, or at least has an opportunity to become available on both of these plays, but the flat is thrown almost instantly, almost as if he's predetermining where he's going with the ball, which, again, we'll talk about that in a second. But even outside of him throwing the ball short of the sticks, he's been far too aggressive and far too easy to bait into interceptions, even though he only has one on the season. Take this Arizona play where Avery gets baited into throwing a post against single high coverages. To put it in the shortest terms I possibly can, you do not throw a post against single high coverages, because that safety is going to be directly in front of the post window. And if you are going to throw it, you need to overthrow it and not underthrow it. He ends up thinking on this play that he has a one-on-one with Jace Brown, but he just doesn't. And there is another open receiver on this play if you get a few certain angles. He also thinks that he has a one-on-one on this play, where he has a much easier completion on the backside of the play for a first down on a 3rd and 6. Again, it is a lot of that aggressive play. And it's not a bad choice because his arm can't make that throw. It's a bad choice because there are easier throws that don't put as much stress on his arm or anyone else on the offense. And I think the big issue with this is he gets stuck on one read and then goes with what he sees when he looks at the receiver instead of looking at the defense and going from there. The best quarterbacks are very rarely looking at their receiver when they're running the routes. They're reading where the defenders are and then trying to figure out where the space is. That's why some people compare playing quarterback to playing point guard in basketball. You're not necessarily throwing it to a guy, you're throwing it to open space and then trusting that said guy will be there. Let's look at Avery lock in on what is the clear out or a check down on this play. There is no universe where this ball should be checked down this early and this quickly, especially when I know that there are people open on this play, and Avery just never gives them a second look. And in a lot of ways, that contributes to the book being out on Avery. Blitz him and watch his O-line either miss an assignment, watch him panic, or take the risk of him making an amazing throw that he is more than capable of, such as this play. The entire Arizona game proves this when he was blitzed on over 80% of his snaps. That should never happen to a good quarterback, and that shouldn't happen to any quarterback at all, because most quarterbacks, or good quarterbacks, love being blitzed because that's fewer people in coverage and fewer people to get into passing lanes. And Avery, sad to say, just hasn't gotten to that point. Now, listen, I fully understand that some of these issues could come down to Avery pressing and trying to do too much on any given play, rather than going out there and playing loose and playing the game he's been playing his entire life. We see this with quarterbacks all the time, but that's also something that coaching can help by ensuring that other players get the opportunity to make plays around the quarterback and lifting the load off of their shoulders. And yeah, that leads very well into the last point. So, we've talked about some of the problems that the team has had with execution, but the man who has taken the brunt of the blame, be it fairly or unfairly, is Matt Wells as offensive coordinator. So, here's the thing about Matt Wells. He'll have play calls or concepts that work and then stubbornly revert back to something that doesn't. A general concept that has worked well for K-State in the running game, in fact one of the very few that they have, is the counter game. Look at this play, where they don't exactly run a counter play to perfection, but still gain a good amount of yards. Or this one up against Army. These counter plays show that the offensive lineman's strength is getting out in space and get moving, and their only assignment is the one they have. They're not worrying about other assignments around them, they just have their one job. And they even did this with this nifty little jet counter in the Arizona game, or this play, which I believe is either crunch or a sweep play. Crunch being extremely rare as a running concept, so it's probably sweep, up against Iowa State. And it was one run, one more time, where it didn't work, and then has never been seen again. The same thing happened with this dart play, and that wasn't even the blocking's fault. It was a fluke fumble in a rain game for someone who has played in the rain, being from Florida for the majority of his life. These plays worked, but we rarely see them despite their effectiveness. The main reason I can see this being the case is that even on the plays that work, it doesn't look like the offensive line is winning because, well, as in this play, they're really not. In fact, later, this exact same counter concept, except this time on a keeper, gets dusted because someone whiffs on a block. So even with the play calls that work, you're not getting the consistency that you've seen with running games in the past. But at least you're getting something rather than just throwing your head up against a brick wall. And even in the passing game, where Matt Wells has succeeded in so many other places, has a few of those what are you doing concepts. Like this bootleg play where they're overloading one side to the passing strength only to work the opposite side and have absolutely nothing stopping a linebacker from sitting on the flat. Oh, what do you mean that's what happened? Oh, no. Sorry, guys. Really should have seen that one coming. Or this play, which for some reason has two receivers in the exact same area and compressing the throwing window by doing that. I also fundamentally disagree with running outbreaking routes from the outside against a heavy blitz look when slants are the best way to beat heavy pressure, especially with off coverage like in this example, especially when you're having trouble beating the blitz in general. And although I've defended using stick before, calling it on third down and long, that's not a good choice. And yes, he has done that. And the part that may frustrate me the most is, and God help me for saying this, Matt Wells hasn't utilized screens enough. Avery's percentage for screen passes is 6%. He's thrown a total of 8 of them. Avery is getting blitzed an insane amount of the time and is barely using the thing that people told him he overused at every other stop he had. I can only remember 2 times that he's running wide receiver screen, once against Iowa State to Jaron Bradley and once against Arizona on a slot screen on a 3rd and 5. A screen pass is a play just like any other, and it's especially useful to call to force the defense to tone down the pressure because it gets them moving laterally into the outside. It's extremely hard to both blitz and properly defend a screen pass. When you show that you don't want to run them, you have to force them out of a blitz in different ways, such as counter running, or getting them on the outside running toss plays or anything to get them moving laterally. And Matt Wells just hasn't proven an ability or a willingness to do so. And the last thing that I'm frustrated with about is the many concepts that we've seen during the Iowa State game that have been abandoned. The RPO slant play that K-State ran a few times has disappeared. The sweep play has seemingly disappeared. The under center runs completely disappeared for the Arizona game. The split back formation we saw has disappeared. So many of the things that worked against Iowa State and to an extent worked against Army, but all are gone. And even some things that didn't work in that one instance could still be used to add flavor to an offense that is desperately searching for any kind of counterpunch, and they're just gone. And that's the part that hurts the most. Now, listen, I'm not one to leave off and just say everything is awful and nothing will ever be right again, mostly because I don't find that to be healthy or helpful discourse. After all, useless discourse is what Twitter is for. My main priority is to look at solutions and how K-State could possibly improve. Even if my voice technically has no weight or bearing on what will actually happen, it's very comforting to think that there are solutions, because there are. To me, the first and foremost thing that has to be addressed is how to force defenses from stopping the blitz. What's the quickest way to do this? Well, it used to be the Matt Wells special in screen passes, and I know, I've already mentioned that people in Lubbock wanted Matt Wells' head on a stick after the amount of screen passes that he called at Texas Tech, but it's also true that it's an undeniably effective way to ensure that defenses have to at least think twice about blitzing. Throw a wide receiver screen to the outside a bit more and watch as defenses have to respect that space more, or at least have an extra second of hesitation. This could help with the running game as well because defenses would have to take an extra beat to honor the rest of the field. And that is why coaches say that screens are an extension of the running game. They are two peas in the same pod. Low-risk play calls that are meant to at least put one or two players into conflict so that way you can more easily block them and gain a consistent 2, 3, 4, 5 yards while getting the occasional long play afterwards. You can't do that when everyone is pinching at the line of scrimmage to immediately assassinate any run that they may have had. And speaking of the running game, is I would do a lot more to run the counter or the power games as opposed to just the zone game that they've been using a lot. This offensive line is at their worst running inside zone, something that we even saw towards the back end of last year, and they have been far more effective getting themselves out in space and just hitting one guy rather than having to feel out every block around them. In other words, get it to where the offensive line has one thing to think about as opposed to thinking about every single thing around them. That's why the counter plays, the few times that they've been run, even on plays that are technically whiffs, they've still been more successful than the inside zone running game. And if you still want to run inside zone, you could still attach the zone read component and have a split block, which again, we've seen a few times. And a split block is just a tight end going across the formation to make sure that the play isn't caught from the backside. That would help the running game a lot, especially when teams have shown a propensity for loading the backside of the run and trying to take it down from that backside of the play. It's something that they've been able to do especially well. Outside of those 2 points, the most important thing that I could say is no matter what they do is to just try and find some kind of offensive identity. Yes, we can all wax poetic about, oh, Avery needs to run more. Oh, the running game needs to be better. Oh, the offensive line needs to be better. You could list a myriad of different factors that need to be better, but almost none of that will matter if there isn't some kind of identity behind it. And frankly, I don't even care what the identity is. If K-State decides that they're going to be an air raid team that's going to run a lot more in the way of option routes or throw a lot more screen passes and play to the offensive line's true pass blocking strength, that's fine by me. If they decide they want to be a spread triple option team, more power to them. It's just anything that gives them some semblance of an identity would help them a lot towards the back end of the year. I think I'm in the minority when I say that I don't think that this season is over. Yes, Arlington is probably a pipe dream, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the season can't have any successes to it. That doesn't mean that this team is going to not win a single game after their one win against an FCS school. There are solutions here, and I've posed a few, but the ultimate onus comes down to the offensive coaching staff and figuring out exactly how they're going to right this ship. If you want a little piece of optimism, there's one thing that I can offer. This offense has the talent to still be good towards the back end of the year. Jaron Bradley when he returns from injury, Jace Brown, Jaron Tibbs, Dylan Edwards, Avery Johnson, Garrett Oakley, Joe Jackson, Devon Rice, and even John Price up to this point, they've all shown flashes of what they can do and what they can be. Now, it's just up to the offensive coaching staff to make sure that their skill sets can shine. And to do that, they have to start by finding an identity. And to be honest, I genuinely think they can. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching.